The diplomatic station hung in space like a massive steel flower, its petals made of docking bays and observation decks. Ships from across the galaxy filled those bays, each one more impressive than the last. Sleek vessels with mirror-smooth hulls, elegant cruisers that seemed to flow rather than fly, warships that glowed with barely contained energy, and then there was the Perseverance. Captain Sarah Reeves stood on her bridge and watched through the view screen as her ship approached the station. She saw what everyone else saw, a 40-year-old battleship with a hull covered in repair patches, a design that looked blocky and crude next to the alien vessels, weapons that stuck out from the sides like old cannons instead of being smoothly integrated into the ship's frame. "They're staring at us, Captain," said Lieutenant James Park from the tactical station. His voice carried a hint of embarrassment. "Let them stare," Sarah replied calmly. She was a tall woman with gray streaking through her dark hair. 20 years in the United Human Space Force had taught her that looking good and being good were two different things. The communication panel chirped. "UHSF Perseverance, this is Galactic Council Station Control. You are cleared for Docking Bay 47. Chief Engineer Marcus Webb snorted from his station near the back of the bridge. "Bay 47. That's practically the trash section." "Belay that, Chief," Sarah said, but she understood his frustration. Marcus had kept this ship running for 15 years. Every system, every rivet, every wire was something he had maintained with his own hands. To him, the Perseverance was more than metal and machines. The docking procedure went smoothly despite the age of the ship. Within an hour, Sarah found herself walking through the station's Grand Council chamber with Ambassador David Chen. The room was enormous, with a curved ceiling that displayed a perfect hologram of the galaxy itself. Representatives from dozens of species sat in tiered seating, looking down at the speaking floor. Ambassador Chen was nervous. Sarah could see it in the way he adjusted his formal jacket every few seconds. This meeting would decide humanity's future in galactic politics. "Distinguished members of the Galactic Council," Chen began, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. "Humanity comes before you seeking membership in the Galactic Defense Coalition. We offer our ships, our soldiers, and our commitment to protecting civilized space." A rumbling sound came from the Vakir section. The Vakir were large beings almost 3 meters tall with thick gray skin and 4 arms. Admiral Kresh stood up, his metals clinking together. "You offer your ships?" Kresh's voice was deep and mocking. "We have seen your ship, Ambassador. It looks like something from a museum. Primitive kinetic weapons, no energy shields. Armor plating that we stopped using 300 years ago." Laughter rippled through the chamber. Not polite chuckles, but real cutting laughter. A silicate representative rose next. The silicates were crystalline beings that communicated through light pulses that translator devices converted to speech. "Our sensors indicate the human vessel is held together with what you call welding patches. It is barely space-worthy." More laughter. Sarah felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her expression neutral. She had faced worse than mockery. Ambassador Chen pressed on. "Our technology may appear outdated, but our combat experience..." "Combat experience?" A Xanthari commander interrupted. The Xanthari resembled humans, but with blue skin and 3 eyes. "Against whom?" "Yourselves. We know your history, humans. You spent centuries fighting each other with chemical explosives and metal bullets. That is not war. That is children playing with toys." The chamber erupted in conversation. Species Sarah had never seen before were now debating whether humanity should even be allowed in the same room as real military powers. Admiral Kresh raised one of his 4 arms, and silence fell. "The Galactic Defense Coalition is composed of proven warriors with advanced technology. However, the Council believes in giving opportunities." He paused, and Sarah knew what was coming next would sting. "We will grant humanity probationary observer status. You may watch our operations. You may learn from us, but you will not participate in actual defense actions." Ambassador Chen's shoulders sagged slightly. "We appreciate the Council's consideration. Your ship will remain docked here during the summit," Kresh continued. "We would not want it to malfunction and cause a navigation hazard." More laughter. Sarah had heard enough. She turned and walked out of the chamber, her boots echoing on the polished floor. Ambassador Chen caught up with her in the corridor outside. "Captain, I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I tried." "You did fine, Ambassador," Sarah replied. They made up their minds before we ever arrived. Back on the Perseverance, the mood was dark. Sarah walked through the corridors and saw it in every crew member's face. They had known the ship was old. They had known other species had better technology. But being laughed at, being called a joke in front of the entire galaxy, that hurt in a way that surprised them. Sarah found Marcus in engineering, as she knew she would. He was running diagnostics on the reactor core, his hands moving over controls with the ease of long practice. "How's she holding up, Chief?" Sarah asked. Marcus looked up. His face was lined with age and hard work, but his eyes were sharp. "This old girl is solid, Captain. Her hull might be patched and her weapons might be old, but everything works. Everything has redundant backups. I could keep her running through hell itself." "That's what I wanted to hear," Sarah said. "Doesn't matter though, does it?" Marcus's voice was bitter. "We're not good enough for their fancy fleet." Sarah started to respond when the ship's alert system blared to life. Red lights flashed in the corridor. Every screen switched to an emergency broadcast. "All vessels, this is Council Station Control. Emergency alert. Krall swarm forces detected entering the system. All military vessels report to combat stations immediately." "This is not a drill." Sarah and Marcus looked at each other for a split second, then both moved. Sarah ran for the bridge while Marcus began shouting orders to his engineering team. The old ship, the joke ship, came alive with the controlled chaos of a crew trained for battle. On the bridge, Sarah slid into her command chair. "Status report. Krall forces detected at the system's edge," Lieutenant Park said, his fingers flying over the tactical display. "Council fleet is scrambling. 40 Krall vessels confirmed." "And us?" Sarah asked. "No orders yet, Captain." Sarah watched the tactical display. She saw the elegant alien warships moving into formation. She saw the Krall forces approaching like a swarm of angry insects. And she saw the diplomatic station, filled with thousands of civilians sitting vulnerable in the center of it all. "Bring the ship to battle stations," Sarah ordered. "Charge all weapons. Wake up our combat drones. Get the railguns hot." "Captain, we haven't been authorized," Park began. "I said battle stations, Lieutenant." Throughout the ship, the crew moved with precision. Missile tubes loaded. Railguns powered up. The old reactor core hummed with building energy. The Perseverance might look like a relic, but it was a relic that was ready to fight. Sarah leaned forward in her chair, studying the tactical situation. The Krall were dangerous. Everyone in human space knew that. They were raiders, pirates, and killers who had terrorized the frontier colonies before humanity had even met the Galactic Council. "Captain," the communication officer called out. "Message from Admiral Kresh's flagship. Put it through." Kresh's face appeared on the screen, his forearms folded in what Sarah now recognized as a dismissive gesture. "Human vessel Perseverance, you are ordered to evacuate to the edge of the system with all civilian ships. The Coalition fleet will handle the Krall threat. Do not interfere." The screen went dark before Sarah could respond. Marcus's voice came through from engineering. "Captain, did that overgrown lizard just tell us to run?" Sarah smiled, but there was no humor in it. "That's exactly what he said, Chief. Maintain battle stations. And keep those engines ready for full combat power." "Understood, Captain." Sarah watched the fleet move out to meet the enemy. She saw the formation they were using, saw the tactics they had chosen, and saw the mistake they were making. She had studied the Krall for years. She knew their patterns, their preferred strategies, their weaknesses. The Coalition fleet was positioning for a frontal assault, all their power concentrated in a forward wall. It looked impressive. It would work perfectly against an enemy that fought traditionally, but the Krall didn't fight traditionally. "Lieutenant Park," Sarah said quietly, "send a priority message to the Coalition fleet. Warn them the Krall will use hit-and-run tactics. Tell them not to cluster their ships." Park sent the message. They waited. No response came. "They're not listening, Captain," Park said. "Then they're about to learn a hard lesson," Sarah replied. The Krall fleet emerged from behind a small moon, moving fast. The Coalition vessels opened fire, their energy weapons creating beautiful streams of colored light across the darkness of space. It looked like a fireworks display, for about 10 seconds. Then the Krall ships activated their cloaking technology, vanished from sensors, and reappeared scattered throughout the Coalition formation. Their weapons, crude but brutally effective, tore into the alien ships at close range. 3 Coalition vessels exploded in the first minute of combat. The Coalition fleet looked magnificent as it formed its battle line. 23 warships, each one a masterpiece of advanced engineering. Their hulls shimmered with energy shields that could turn aside missiles and absorb plasma fire. Their weapons glowed with barely contained power, ready to unleash devastation on any enemy. Captain Sarah Reeves watched them from the Perseverance's bridge and saw only targets waiting to be destroyed. "They're bunching up," Lieutenant Park said from Tactical. "All their ships are within 2 kilometers of each other." "Perfect formation for a frontal assault," Sarah observed. "Terrible formation for a mobile enemy." The communication panel lit up again. Sarah activated it, expecting another dismissal from Admiral Kresh. Instead, she got a young silicate officer whose light patterns translated as nervous urgency. "Captain Reeves, this is Commander Telek of the Crystalline Dawn. We have detected 40 Krull vessels approaching on an attack vector. The Coalition fleet is moving to intercept. Admiral Kresh has ordered all non-combat vessels to evacuate to safe distance." "We're a combat vessel, Commander," Sarah said firmly. There was a pause. "Captain, with respect, Admiral Kresh was specific. The UHSF Perseverance is to evacuate with the civilian ships. You are not authorized to join the defensive formation." Sarah felt anger rise in her chest but pushed it down. Getting emotional accomplished nothing. "Understood, Commander. Perseverance will comply." The screen went dark. Around the bridge, Sarah saw her crew's faces. Disappointment, frustration, shame at being ordered away like children being sent to their rooms. Navigation. "Plot a course to the edge of the system," Sarah ordered. "But keep it slow. Emergency speed only if civilians need protection." "Aye, Captain," the navigator replied, understanding the unspoken message. They would obey the order, but they would stay close enough to watch what happened. The Perseverance turned away from the coming battle, its old engines pushing it toward the system's outer reaches. Sarah kept her eyes on the tactical display, watching the Coalition fleet move into position. "Lieutenant Park, what do you see?" she asked quietly. Park studied his screens, his fingers calling up data streams and tactical projections. He had been with Sarah for 5 years, and she had trained him personally. He understood human military doctrine, the lessons learned through centuries of brutal warfare on Earth. "They're making a mistake, Captain," Park said, his voice low so only Sarah could hear. "The Krull don't fight like that. They won't meet the Coalition head-on. What will they do?" Sarah asked, though she already knew. "Hit and run. They'll use their cloaking to get close, strike fast and disappear before the Coalition can respond. That tight formation will work against them. If the Krull get inside their defensive perimeter, it'll be a slaughter," Sarah finished. Park looked at her. "Should we warn them again?" Sarah pulled up the communication logs. She saw her previous warning message, marked as received but not acknowledged. "Not even opened. Send another one," she said. "Mark it Priority Alpha. Explain the Krull tactical doctrine. Give them our recommendations." Park's hands flew over his console. The message was sent, routed through 3 different channels to make sure it reached the Coalition command ship. They waited. 30 seconds passed, a minute. 2 minutes? "No response, Captain," Park finally said. Sarah nodded slowly. She had expected this. The Coalition had decided humans knew nothing about real warfare. They would not take advice from the species they had mocked hours earlier. "Keep transmitting our tactical analysis on an open channel," Sarah ordered. "If they won't listen to us directly, maybe their computer systems will at least record it." On the main view screen, the Krull fleet became visible. 40 ships, smaller than the Coalition vessels but faster and more maneuverable. They moved in a scattered formation that looked random, but Sarah recognized as carefully coordinated chaos. The Coalition fleet opened fire. Beams of pure energy lanced across space, hitting empty vacuum where Krull ships had been a second before. A few shots connected, splashing against Krull armor but doing minimal damage. Then the Krull activated their cloaking systems. To the Coalition sensors, it looked like 40 enemy ships simply vanished. Sarah watched the confusion ripple through the alien fleet. Ships fired at ghost images. Sensors swept back and forth trying to reacquire targets. The Krull had not vanished. They had just become invisible to the Coalition's advanced sensor systems. Sarah could see them on her own tactical display, or at least she could see where they probably were. The Perseverance's sensors were old, designed to track submarines and stealth aircraft on Earth. They looked for things the Coalition sensors ignored. Heat signatures. Gravitational distortions. The tiny ripples in space that cloaking systems could not completely hide. They're splitting up, Park said, watching his displays, moving to surround the Coalition fleet. And the Coalition still can't see them, Sarah replied. The first crawl attack was devastating. 3 ships appeared from nowhere, right in the middle of the Coalition formation. Their weapons were not elegant energy beams. They were crude plasma cannons that sprayed superheated matter in wide arcs. At point-blank range, they tore through energy shields like paper. A Zenthari destroyer exploded, its reactor going critical. A Vakir cruiser lost its entire portside, atmosphere venting into space along with hundreds of crew members. A silicate frigate simply broke apart, its crystalline structure shattering under the kinetic impact. Then the crawl ships vanished again, cloaking before the Coalition could respond. 3 ships down in 15 seconds, Park said, his voice shocked. Captain, this is a massacre. Sarah leaned forward in her chair. She wanted to help. Every instinct screamed at her to take the Perseverance into the fight. But she had her orders. More importantly, she knew rushing in without a plan would just add one more destroyed ship to the count. The crawl struck again, and again. They appeared, fired, and disappeared like ghosts. Each time, more Coalition ships took damage. Each time, the confusion in the alien fleet grew worse. Admiral Kresh's flagship, the Hammer of Dominion, finally managed to land a solid hit on a crawl raider. The enemy ship's cloak failed, leaving it visible and vulnerable. 5 Coalition ships focused fire on it and it exploded in a satisfying fireball. But that single kill cost them. While the Coalition concentrated on one target, the crawl hit them from 3 other directions. 2 more ships exploded. 4 others took heavy damage. 18 Coalition ships left operational, Park reported. 8 destroyed, 5 heavily damaged and falling back. And the crawl? Sarah asked. 39 ships still active. They've only lost 1. The diplomatic station sent out an emergency broadcast. All Coalition vessels priority alert. Crawl forces are breaking off from the main fleet. Multiple ships heading for the station. We are under attack. Repeat, the station is under attack. Sarah watched the tactical display. 6 crawl ships had separated from the main group and were accelerating toward the station where thousands of civilians sheltered. The Coalition fleet was too busy fighting the main crawl force to help. Captain, Park said urgently, the station has minimal defenses. Those 6 ships will tear it apart, Sarah made her decision. Navigation, bring us about. Full power to engines. Weapons, charge all railguns and load all missile tubes. Drone control, prepare to launch all combat units. The bridge crew stared at her for a moment. Then they moved, their hands flying over controls with practiced efficiency. The Perseverance turned, its old frame groaning with the strain of a hard burn. But it turned and it accelerated toward the diplomatic station. Captain, we're disobeying direct orders, Park said, though he made no move to stop working. I'm aware, Lieutenant, Sarah replied calmly. Note it in the log. Captain Reeves takes full responsibility. From engineering, Marcus Webb's voice came through the intercom. Captain, I'm seeing some interesting power draws up there. Are we by any chance doing something foolish and heroic? Just keep the reactor stable, Chief, Sarah said. That's not an answer, Captain. It's all the answer you're getting. Perseverance out. The old battleship burned toward the station, racing against the crawl raiders. Sarah ran calculations in her head. The crawl would reach the station first. They would have maybe 2 minutes to fire on the civilians before the Perseverance arrived. Unless Sarah could get their attention first. Communication. Open a channel. Broadband all frequencies, Sarah ordered. Channel open, Captain. Sarah took a breath. Crawl vessels approaching diplomatic station. This is the UHSF Perseverance. Your path is blocked. Turn away now or be destroyed, silence answered her. Then the communication panel crackled with what Sarah assumed was crawl laughter. It sounded like metal scraping on metal. Human ship, a translated voice said. We have seen your pathetic vessel. You are no threat. We will destroy the station and then we will destroy you for our amusement. That's the spirit, Sarah muttered. To her crew, she said. They took the bait. All ships are adjusting course. They're coming for us instead of the station. 6 crawl raiders against 1 human ship, Park said. Those aren't good odds, Captain, Sarah smiled. They're not. For the crawl ships dropped their cloaking. They wanted the Perseverance to see them coming. They wanted the humans to know their deaths were approaching. The main battle had turned into chaos. What started as an organized coalition fleet was now a scattered mess of damaged ships trying to survive against an enemy they could barely see. Energy weapons fired in all directions, hitting nothing but empty space. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers as ships died one by one. Admiral Kresh's flagship, the Hammer of Dominion, listed to one side, trailing atmosphere and debris. Half its weapons were offline. Its beautiful energy shields, which had cost more than a small planet's economy, flickered weakly as power systems failed. Inside the command center, Kresh slammed one of his 4 fists against his console. How are these primitives defeating us? Our technology is superior. Our ships are faster. Our weapons are more powerful. His tactical officer, a young Vakir named Trell, looked up from his station. Admiral, the Kraul are not fighting the way our simulations predicted. They refuse to engage in proper formation combat. They strike and retreat before we can respond. Then adapt, Kresh roared. Use our advantages. Our shields can withstand their weapons. Our sensors can track them. Our shields are failing, Admiral, Trell said quietly. And our sensors cannot track them when they cloak. We need a new strategy. Before Kresh could respond, another explosion rocked the flagship. Warning alarms blared throughout the command center. A Kraul raider had appeared less than 100 meters away, fired directly into the Hammer's engine section, and vanished again. Engine power at 30%, an engineer called out. We're losing propulsion. Kresh stared at his displays, watching his fleet die. 11 ships destroyed, 8 more heavily damaged. The Kraul had lost only 3 vessels. This was not a battle. This was an execution. All ships fall back to defensive formation around the station, Kresh ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. We cannot win this fight. We can only try to protect the civilians. As the order went out, another voice cut across all Coalition frequencies. Coalition vessels, this is the UHSF Perseverance. We're coming in. Kresh turned to his communication officer. The human ship? They were ordered to evacuate. They're approaching the combat zone at full speed, Admiral. And sensors show. Admiral, they just destroyed 4 Kraul raiders near the diplomatic station. Kresh felt something he had not expected to feel in this battle. Hope. Perhaps not hope for victory, but hope that anyone had figured out how to fight these ghosts. Put them on screen, Kresh ordered. The view screen showed the Perseverance burning toward the battle. Its hull was still patched and scarred. Its design was still blocky and primitive. But now Kresh saw something he had missed before. The ship moved with purpose. Every angle of approach was calculated. Every weapon port was open and ready. This was not a museum piece. This was a warship that had been built for one purpose: to fight and survive. Captain Sarah Reeves appeared on the communication channel. Her face was calm, but her eyes were hard. Admiral Kresh, my tactical officer, is transmitting our combat data to your fleet. We've been tracking the Kraul since they appeared. We know where they are even when they cloak. That's impossible, Kresh said. Our sensors are the most advanced in the galaxy. If we cannot track them, your sensors are looking for the wrong things, Sarah interrupted. You're using active scanning, energy detection, electromagnetic signatures. The Kraul know how to hide from all of that, but they can't hide their mass. They can't hide their heat. They can't hide the way they disturb space-time when they move. On the Perseverance's bridge, Lieutenant Park was sending data streams to every Coalition ship in range. Tactical predictions, heat maps, gravitational distortion patterns, all the things that Earth's militaries had learned to track when fighting stealth aircraft and submarines. Some of your ships are receiving our data, Sarah continued. Tell them to use it. Tell them to stop trying to fight the Kraul the way they fight each other. Adapt, improvise, survive. Kresh was about to respond when proximity alarms screamed throughout his command center. 2 Kraul ships had appeared directly above the Hammer of Dominion, weapons charging for a killing blow. Then the Perseverance's railguns fired, 2 solid slugs, each weighing several tons, each moving at relativistic speeds, crossed the distance in less than a second. The first Kraul ship exploded as the round punched through its entire length. The second ship's engines disintegrated, leaving it helpless and drifting. That's 2 more for the humans, Trell said, his voice filled with amazement. Sarah's face was still on the view screen. Admiral, I recommend you organize your remaining ships into small groups. No more than 3 vessels per group. Stay mobile. Watch each other's backs. Use our tracking data to anticipate where the Kraul will appear. Fight them like we fought wars on Earth for centuries. And how is that? Kresh asked. Dirty, Sarah replied. No honor, no glory. Just whatever it takes to survive and win. She paused. We're transmitting our complete tactical doctrine now. I suggest you read it quickly. The channel closed. Kresh turned to Trell. Analysis. Trell pulled up the human data on his console. He read for a moment, his eyes growing wider. Admiral, these tactics are brutal. Using debris as cover. Firing on predicted positions instead of confirmed targets. Coordinating overlapping fields of fire so the enemy cannot escape. Intentionally damaging our own ships to lure enemies into traps. Will it work? Kresh demanded. It's completely against our military doctrine, Trell said. It's unpredictable. It's wasteful. It ignores proper formation structure. He looked up at his admiral. Yes, Admiral. I think it will work. Kresh made his decision. Send the human tactical data to all ships. All commanders are authorized to implement these unconventional methods. Break formation, split into 3 ship groups, and start fighting like humans. The coalition fleet began to change. Ships that had been clustered together spread out. Commanders who had spent their entire careers following proper military doctrine started making up new tactics on the spot. They used asteroids for cover. They fired at empty space where the Perseverance's data said crawl ships would appear. They stopped trying to be elegant and started trying to survive. And slowly, carefully, the tide began to turn. A Xanthari destroyer, working with 2 silicate frigates, executed a perfect ambush. They let a crawl raider chase one ship while the other 2 circled around. When the crawl appeared to strike, all 3 coalition ships opened fire simultaneously. The crawl ship had nowhere to run. It died in a crossfire of energy beams and plasma. A Vakir cruiser badly damaged and limping used itself as bait. It broadcast false damage reports, making itself look helpless. When 3 crawl ships moved in for the kill, the cruiser's escorts appeared from behind a debris field and caught the crawl in a deadly surprise. The Perseverance moved through the battle like a predator. Sarah kept her ship on the edges of the main fighting, picking off crawl vessels that tried to flank coalition ships. Her railguns spoke again and again, each shot perfectly calculated. Her missiles flew in patterns that seemed random but forced the crawl into kill zones. Her combat drones swarmed enemy ships, overwhelming their point defenses. In the engineering section of the Perseverance, Chief Marcus Webb watched his displays with satisfaction. The old reactor was running hot, pushing more power than it had in years. Damage reports came in from various sections of the ship, but nothing critical, nothing his crew couldn't handle. Engineering to bridge, Marcus called through the intercom. Captain, I'm getting some stress readings on the portside armor. We've taken a few hits. How bad? Sarah asked. Nothing the old girl can't handle. But if we take many more hits in the same spot, we'll have a hull breach. Noted. Chief, keep her together. Always do, Captain. On the bridge, Lieutenant Park was coordinating with coalition ships, sending them targeting data and tactical suggestions. He watched as a silicate cruiser used human tactics to destroy a crawl raider. Then another coalition ship scored a kill. Then another. Captain, coalition vessels are starting to get the hang of it, Park reported. Crawl losses are increasing. And ours? Sarah asked. We've lost 2 more ships in the last 10 minutes. But that's 2 in 10 minutes instead of 2 per minute. We're holding. Sarah studied the tactical display. 27 crawl ships remained active. 14 coalition ships were still combat capable. The numbers were almost even now, but the crawl still had an advantage. They were faster. Their weapons were devastating at close range. And they could still disappear whenever they wanted. The crawl fleet commander, whoever they were, seemed to recognize this. The crawl ships began to regroup, pulling back from the scattered coalition vessels. Sarah watched them form up into a tight formation for the first time in the battle. They're changing tactics, Park said, bringing all their remaining ships together. Concentrating their strength, Sarah agreed. They're going to hit us with everything they have. One massive assault. Can the coalition fleet handle it? Park asked. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Not all of them. Some ships will die. She turned to her communication officer. Get me Admiral Kresh. The Admiral's face appeared on screen. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were clearer than before. Captain Reeves, we see the crawl formation. What are your recommendations? Don't meet them head on, Sarah said immediately. That's what they want. The Perseverance charged toward the crawl formation, like an ancient warrior running into battle. Every system aboard the old ship screamed in protest as Chief Marcus Webb pushed the reactor beyond safe limits. Power flowed through conduits that were never designed to carry such loads. Heat sinks glowed red. Cooling systems worked overtime, and the ship kept flying. Captain Sarah Reeves watched the distance close on her tactical display. 27 crawl ships waited ahead, their weapons charged and ready. Behind the Perseverance, the Coalition fleet held position, waiting for their moment. 5,000 kilometers, Lieutenant Park announced. They're holding formation. I think they're confused about what we're doing. They've never seen anyone charge directly at them before, Sarah said. Everyone they've fought runs away or tries to defend. We're attacking. They don't know how to process that. Captain, we're getting multiple target locks, the tactical officer reported. Every crawl ship has weapons trained on us. Perfect, Sarah said calmly. Prepare missile spread alpha. Load all tubes with high explosive rounds. Set the railguns for rapid fire mode. In the engineering section, Marcus felt the ship shudder as weapon systems drew massive amounts of power. His screen showed stress readings going into the red zone across multiple systems. A younger engineer might have panicked. Marcus just adjusted the power flow and kept the reactor stable. Engineering to bridge, he called. Captain, you're going to burn out half our systems at this rate. Will we survive the next 30 minutes? Sarah asked. Marcus looked at his screens, running calculations. Probably. Then I'll take probably. Keep giving me power, Chief. Aye, Captain. But when this is over, you're buying me the biggest drink in the galaxy. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Deal. Perseverance out. The crawl fleet opened fire. Energy weapons and plasma cannons unleashed a storm of destruction. The space between the two forces lit up with deadly light, and Sarah did something the crawl did not expect. She turned her ship, not away from the attack, sideways. The Perseverance rolled 90 degrees on its axis, presenting its smallest profile to the incoming fire. Shots that would have hit the ship's broad front instead streaked past harmlessly. A few plasma bursts caught the edge of the hull, scorching armor but doing minimal damage. Evasive pattern delta, Sarah ordered. Keep them guessing. The Perseverance began to dance. It jinked left, then right. It accelerated, then decelerated. It rolled and spun on multiple axes. The movement seemed random, but they followed patterns that human pilots had developed centuries ago when dodging anti-aircraft fire and surface-to-air missiles. The crawl kept firing, but most of their shots missed. They were used to enemies that held formation, that maintained steady courses, that fought with predictable tactics. The Perseverance fought like a fighter jet, not a capital ship. 3,000 kilometers, Park announced, entering optimal missile range. Fire all tubes, Sarah ordered. Spread pattern. Make them work for it. The Perseverance launched 60 missiles in 10 seconds. They streaked toward the crawl formation in a spreading pattern that forced the enemy to choose. Defend against the missiles or keep firing at the Perseverance. They could not do both effectively. The crawl chose to defend. Point defense systems activated, tracking and destroying the incoming missiles. Explosions dotted space as warheads detonated. But while the crawl focused on the missiles, Sarah gave her next order. Railguns fire! The Perseverance's main weapon spoke. Solid tungsten rounds accelerated to incredible speeds. Unlike the missiles, these could not be shot down. They were too small, too fast, too simple. They were just metal moving very, very quickly. The first crawl ship took 3 hits. Its hull cracked. Atmosphere vented. Secondary explosions rippled along its length as internal systems failed. It did not explode in a dramatic fireball. It just stopped working and began to drift. 1 down, Park said. 26 to go, Sarah replied. Continue evasive maneuvers. Reload all weapons. The crawl formation broke apart. Exactly as Sarah had predicted, they split into 2 groups. 15 ships continued toward the Coalition fleet. 12 ships turned to pursue the Perseverance. Admiral Kresh, the hook is set, Sarah transmitted to the Coalition fleet. 12 crawl ships are breaking off to engage us. The remaining 15 are heading your way. Hit them with everything you have. Understood, Captain Reeves, Kresh's voice came back. And Captain? Good hunting. The Coalition fleet surged forward, no longer trying to hold a defensive position. 14 Coalition ships against 15 crawl vessels. Almost even odds. And now the Coalition knew how to fight. Sarah did not have time to watch that battle. She had her own problems. 12 crawl ships were closing fast and they looked angry. They're spreading out, Park observed. Trying to surround us. Let them, Sarah said. Navigation, bring us about. Head toward that asteroid cluster at coordinates I'm sending you now. The navigator looked at his screen. Captain, that's a dense field. Lots of rocks, lots of debris. Maneuvering will be difficult. For us, Sarah agreed. It'll be impossible for them. The Perseverance turned and burned toward the asteroid cluster. The crawl ships followed, accelerating to cut off the human vessel before it could reach cover. Sarah watched the distances decrease. The asteroids grew larger on her view screen. Space rocks ranging from the size of a house to the size of a small city, all tumbling through the darkness in a chaotic dance. Entering the field in 30 seconds, the navigator announced nervously. All hands, brace for impact maneuvers, Sarah announced. This is going to be rough. The Perseverance plunged into the asteroid field at full speed. Immediately, proximity alarms began screaming. Rocks appeared from all sides, some moving with the ship, others on collision courses. The navigator's hands flew over his controls, adjusting course every few seconds. The old battleship twisted and turned, threading through gaps that seemed too small. Once, a football field-sized asteroid passed less than 50 meters from the port side. The crew felt the ship shake from the gravitational interaction. Behind them, the crawl ships followed. They were faster than the Perseverance, more maneuverable, but they were also larger and more dependent on their automated systems. When a crawl ship tried to make a hard turn to avoid an asteroid, its computer systems hesitated for a split second, calculating the optimal path. That split second was too long. The crawl ship clipped the asteroid, tearing a gash in its hull. It tumbled out of control, crashing into another rock and breaking apart. 2 down, Park said. The remaining 11 crawl ships became more cautious. They slowed down, giving their computers more time to calculate safe paths. Sarah used that hesitation. All stop, she ordered. Kill our momentum. Bring us behind that large asteroid at bearing 270. The Perseverance fired its braking thrusters, bleeding off speed. It slipped behind a massive asteroid the size of a small moon, disappearing from the crawl sensors. They've lost us, Park reported. They're spreading out, searching. Sarah studied her tactical display. The 11 crawl ships had separated, each one moving to a different section of the asteroid field to search for the human vessel. They had made the mistake of splitting their strength. Target the closest ship, Sarah ordered. Calculate its trajectory. When it passes within 200 meters of that cluster of small asteroids, fire all forward railguns. They waited. 30 seconds. 60. The crawl ship moved through the field, its sensors sweeping back and forth looking for the Perseverance. Now, Sarah said quietly. The Perseverance fired. 3 railgun rounds crossed the distance in less than a second. The first round hit the crawl ship dead center. The second and third rounds hit the asteroids near the enemy vessel. The asteroids exploded into fragments. Thousands of pieces of rock ranging from pebbles to boulders blasted outward. The crawl ship flew directly into this artificial debris field. Its hull was shredded. Its engines failed. It spun away, leaking atmosphere and fluids. 3 down, Park said, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction. Keep moving, Sarah ordered. Don't give them time to regroup. Find us another target. For the next 20 minutes, the Perseverance fought a battle unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. It used the asteroids as cover and as weapons. It appeared, fired, and disappeared like a ghost. It lured crawl ships into traps and ambushes. It fought with every dirty trick that human militaries had learned over centuries of warfare. The crawl fought bravely, but they were out of their element. They were raiders, used to attacking weaker targets and disappearing. They were not prepared for an enemy that used the environment as a weapon, that refused to fight fair, that treated every rule of civilized combat as a suggestion to be ignored. A crawl ship managed to get a solid hit on the Perseverance's port side. The explosion tore through 2 decks, killing 6 crew members and injuring 12 more. Atmosphere vented into space before emergency doors sealed off the damaged sections. Damage report, Sarah called out. Port side weapons offline, Park reported. Hull breach on decks 7 and 8. Casualties confirmed. Sarah felt the loss of her crew members like a physical pain, but she pushed it aside. There would be time to grieve later. Right now she had to keep fighting. Seal off the damaged sections, she ordered. Reroute power from port weapons to starboard. Continue evasive maneuvers. The diplomatic station's medical bay was filled with wounded from a dozen different species. Vakir soldiers with their thick skin torn open. Silicate beings with cracks running through their crystalline bodies. Zenthari officers with burns covering their blue skin. And in one corner, separated by a curtain, 23 human crew members from the Perseverance, Captain Sarah Reeves, walked among the beds, stopping at each one. She knew every name, every face, every story. Private Chen, who had been in engineering when the port side exploded. Lieutenant Morrison, who had held a damaged bulkhead closed with his bare hands until help arrived. Ensign Patel, who was only 19 years old and had never been in combat before today. "How are you holding up, Ensign?" Sarah asked gently. Patel looked up from her bed. Her arm was in a medical brace and bandages covered half her face. "I'm okay, Captain. The doctors say I'll be back to duty in a few weeks." "Take your time," Sarah said. "No one expects you to rush recovery." "Captain," Patel said quietly. "Did we really win?" Sarah nodded. "We won. The crawler gone. The station is safe. Everyone survived because of what we did." Patel closed her eyes. 9 people from our crew didn't survive, Captain." "I know," Sarah said, her voice heavy. "I know, and we'll honor them. But you're alive, Ensign. They fought so you could be alive. Don't waste that gift." Sarah continued through the medical bay, visiting each of her injured crew. Some were sleeping. Some were in pain despite the medication. All of them looked up at her with expressions that mixed pride with grief. When she finally left the medical bay, Sarah found Chief Marcus Webb waiting in the corridor. He had grease stains on his uniform and exhaustion written across his face. "Chief, you should be resting," Sarah said. "Can't rest yet, Captain," Marcus replied. "The ship needs me. We've got hull breaches to seal, systems to repair, a reactor to cool down properly. The old girl took a beating." "How bad is it?" Marcus pulled up a data pad and showed her the damage reports. "Portside is a mess. We've got holes in the hull big enough to fly a shuttle through. Half our port weapons are scrap metal. The reactor needs a complete overhaul. Power systems are fried in sections 3 through 7. Life support is running on backup generators." He paused. "Captain, it'll take 3 months of shipyard work to get us back to full capability." "But she'll fly again?" Sarah asked. Marcus smiled. "Captain, I've kept this ship flying through things that would have killed any other vessel. A little battle damage isn't going to stop her now. She'll fly again. I promise you that." Sarah put her hand on his shoulder. "Go get some rest, Chief. That's an order. Your crew can handle things for a few hours." "Aye, Captain," Marcus said reluctantly. "But if anything important breaks, someone better wake me up." Sarah made her way to the station's memorial hall, where the bodies of the fallen were being prepared for funeral services. 9 flag-draped containers sat in a row, each one containing a crew member who would never see home again. Lieutenant James Park stood in front of one of the containers. His hands were clasped behind his back, his head bowed. Sarah walked up beside him. "He was a good officer," she said quietly, looking at the name on the container. "Lieutenant David Park. No relation to James despite the shared last name." "He saved the bridge, Captain," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "When that hull breach started, he could have evacuated. Instead, he stayed at his station and manually sealed the emergency doors. He trapped himself in the damaged section to save the rest of us." "I know," Sarah said. "I was there. I saw him do it." She turned to look at James. "He died a hero, Lieutenant." "They all did. Does that make it easier?" James asked. "Knowing they died as heroes?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "No, it doesn't make it easier. But it makes it matter. They didn't die for nothing. They died protecting others. That's worth something," a voice interrupted them. "Captain Reeves?" Sarah turned to see Admiral Kresh standing at the entrance to the memorial hall. The large Vakir looked uncomfortable, as if he was not sure he should be there. "Admiral," Sarah acknowledged. "May I enter?" Kresh asked. "I wish to pay my respects." Sarah nodded. Kresh walked forward, his heavy footsteps echoing in the quiet hall. He stopped in front of the 9 containers and stood silently for a long moment. "I did not know these humans," Kresh finally said. "But I know they died fighting to save my people, my crew, my ship." He turned to look at Sarah. "The galaxy owes them a debt that can never be repaid." "The galaxy owes them remembrance," Sarah said. "That's all any soldier really wants, to be remembered." Kresh bowed his head in agreement. "They will be remembered, Captain." "I will make certain of it." He straightened. "Captain, the Galactic Council has requested your presence in the main chamber. They wish to speak with you." Sarah felt tired down to her bones. The last thing she wanted was another political meeting. But duty was duty. "When?" "In 1 hour," Kresh said. "Captain, I think you will find this meeting very different from the last one." An hour later, Sarah walked into the council chamber again. This time she was alone. Ambassador Chen had offered to accompany her, but Sarah had declined. Whatever was about to happen, she would face it as a ship captain, not hiding behind a diplomat. The chamber was full, just as it had been before. But the atmosphere was completely different. When Sarah entered, every being in the room stood. The gesture of respect was universal across almost all species. Sarah walked to the speaking floor and waited. The council speaker, a Zenthari elder named Vex, stepped forward. Captain Sarah Reeves of the United Human Space Force, the Galactic Council recognizes you. Thank you, Speaker, Sarah said formally. Vex continued. Yesterday, this council questioned humanity's place in galactic civilization. We doubted your technology. We mocked your vessel. We dismissed your capabilities. He paused. We were wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Today, the Crawl Swarm attacked this station with 40 warships. They destroyed or crippled half the Coalition defense fleet. They came close to massacring thousands of civilians. They would have succeeded except for one thing. Vex looked directly at Sarah. The battleship we labeled a joke. The crew we dismissed as primitives. The captain we did not even allow to fight. Admiral Kresh stood up from his seat. Captain Reeves and the UHSF Perseverance engaged and destroyed or disabled 27 crawl vessels. They protected the diplomatic station when we could not. They taught us tactics that saved the entire Coalition fleet. And they did all of this after being ordered to evacuate, knowing they faced court-martial for disobeying direct orders. Another Vakir officer stood. I command the battleship Iron Will. We lost shields, lost weapons, and were minutes from destruction. The Perseverance appeared, drew the enemy fire, and gave us time to evacuate our crew. 140 Vakir owe their lives to the humans. A silicate representative rose, light pulsing from their crystalline form. The human tactical doctrine they shared has been analyzed by our military strategists. It is brutal. It is unconventional. It ignores centuries of accepted military theory. And it works. It works better than anything we have developed in the last 1,000 years. One by one, representatives stood and spoke. Each one had a story of how the Perseverance had saved lives, taught lessons, or changed the course of the battle. Sarah stood silently, uncomfortable with the praise but knowing she had to accept it on behalf of her crew. Finally, Speaker Vex raised his hand for silence. Captain Reeves, the Galactic Council faces a decision. Your ship disobeyed direct orders from a Coalition admiral. By our laws, you should face disciplinary action. Sarah nodded. She had expected this. I understand, Speaker. I take full responsibility for my actions. My crew was following my orders. Any punishment should fall on me alone. However, Vex continued, those same laws allow for exceptional circumstances. The Council has reviewed your actions. We have consulted with Admiral Kresh and other surviving commanders. We have reached a unanimous decision. He paused, letting the tension build. Captain Sarah Reeves, your disobedience is officially recognized as justified by military necessity. No charges will be filed. Furthermore, the Galactic Council hereby grants humanity full membership in the Galactic Defense Coalition, with all rights and responsibilities that entails. The chamber erupted in cheers. Species that had never agreed on anything before were now applauding together. Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she had not even realized she was carrying. But Vex was not finished. Additionally, the Council recognizes that our military doctrine is flawed. We have become too dependent on technology, too focused on elegant solutions, too divorced from the reality of warfare. We have forgotten the fundamental truth that Captain Reeves reminded us of today. War is not about having the best weapons. It is about having the will to use whatever you have to protect what matters. He turned to face the entire chamber. Therefore, the Council proposes the following. The UHSF Perseverance, upon completion of its repairs, will be designated as a Coalition training vessel. Captain Reeves and her crew will teach our military officers the human way of warfare. Tactics, strategy, the mindset required to adapt and overcome against any enemy. Admiral Kresh stood again. I formally volunteer the Vakir fleet to be the first students. We have much to learn,